The Earth's climate is changing. Temperatures are rising, ice caps are melting, and natural disasters are becoming more frequent and severe. The scientific consensus is clear. Human activity, primarily the burning of fossil fuels, is the dominant cause of this rapid warming. The consequences of inaction are dire, threatening the delicate balance of ecosystems and the future of life as we know it. Time is of the essence, and the need for decisive action has never been greater. We stand at a crossroads, facing a challenge that demands a fundamental shift in our relationship with the planet. The choices we make today will determine the course of our future, and the stakes could not be higher. The urgency of the climate crisis cannot be overstated. It is a global emergency that transcends national borders and political ideologies. At the heart of this crisis lies a complex and often contentious relationship: the interplay between capitalism and climate change. Capitalism as a dominant economic system has propelled unprecedented technological advancements and economic growth. However, it has also come at a steep price, driving unsustainable consumption patterns and exacerbating global inequalities. The relentless pursuit of profit and economic growth, often at the expense of environmental protection and social justice, has pushed our planet to the brink. The very foundations of capitalism, rooted in the principles of private property, competition, and the pursuit of self-interest, are being called into question. The relentless drive for economic growth, often measured by gross domestic product, GDP, has led to a system that prioritizes short-term profits over long-term sustainability. At the heart of capitalism's contribution to climate change lies its relentless pursuit of economic growth. The capitalist system, by its very nature, demands constant expansion, ever-increasing production, and a perpetual quest for higher profits. This growth imperative, often measured by gross domestic product, GDP, has become the primary metric of success, overshadowing the crucial considerations of environmental sustainability and social well-being. This insatiable appetite for growth necessitates a corresponding increase in the consumption of natural resources, particularly fossil fuels. The reign of fossil fuels as the dominant energy source is deeply intertwined with the rise of capitalism. The discovery and exploitation of vast reserves of coal, oil, and natural gas provided the energy necessary to fuel the Industrial Revolution, propelling unprecedented economic growth and transforming human societies. However, this dependence on fossil fuels has created a powerful and entrenched industry with vested interests in maintaining the status quo. Fossil fuel companies, with their vast wealth and political influence, have long played a significant role in shaping energy policies, often prioritizing short-term profits over long-term sustainability. They have engaged in aggressive lobbying efforts to delay or derail climate action, downplaying the risks of climate change and promoting misinformation about renewable energy alternatives. This resistance to change has hindered the transition to a cleaner, more sustainable energy future. One of the most insidious aspects of capitalism's relationship with climate change is the tendency to externalize environmental costs. In the pursuit of profit maximization, corporations often shift the burden of their environmental impacts onto society at large, particularly vulnerable communities and future generations. This practice of externalization allows corporations to reap the benefits of environmentally destructive activities while avoiding the full costs of their actions. For example, fossil fuel companies have long profited from the extraction and combustion of fossil fuels, despite knowing the harmful effects of greenhouse gas emissions. The costs of climate change, such as sea level rise, extreme weather events, and health problems associated with air pollution, are borne by society as a whole, rather than by the companies responsible for the pollution. The relentless pursuit of economic growth, fueled by capitalism's insatiable appetite for expansion, has placed immense pressure on the Earth's natural systems. The extraction and consumption of resources at an unprecedented scale have disrupted the delicate balance of ecosystems, pushing the planet to the brink of ecological collapse. The consequences of this ecological overshoot are becoming increasingly apparent, from the melting of glaciers and ice caps to the acidification of oceans and the widespread loss of biodiversity. The burning of fossil fuels, the backbone of industrial capitalism, releases massive amounts of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, trapping heat and driving global warming. This warming effect is disrupting weather patterns, leading to more frequent and severe heat waves, droughts, floods, and storms. The consequences for human societies are dire, threatening food security, water resources, and the stability of entire ecosystems. Climate change is not merely an environmental issue, it is a profound social justice issue. The impacts of climate change are not felt equally. They disproportionately affect the most vulnerable populations, both within and across nations. Those who have contributed the least to the problem are often the most severely impacted, highlighting the deep inequalities that permeate our globalized world. In developing countries, where poverty and inequality are often more pronounced, the impacts of climate change are particularly severe. Rising sea levels threaten coastal communities and island nations, displacing millions of people and jeopardizing livelihoods. Droughts and floods exacerbate food insecurity, leading to malnutrition and famine. Extreme heat waves pose significant health risks, particularly for the elderly and those with underlying health conditions. One of the most significant obstacles to addressing climate change is the pervasive short-termism that characterizes our political and economic systems. The relentless pursuit of quarterly profits and electoral cycles often trumps the long-term considerations essential for tackling a problem as complex and multifaceted as climate change. This myopic focus on the present undermines our ability to make the transformative changes necessary to secure a sustainable future. Politicians, often beholden to powerful special interests and short-term electoral cycles, are reluctant to implement policies that may be unpopular in the short term, even if they are essential for long-term sustainability. This political short-termism is compounded by the economic incentives of capitalism, which prioritize immediate profits over long-term investments in renewable energy, energy efficiency, and other climate-friendly technologies. The consequences of our inaction are no longer theoretical or distant threats. They are unfolding before our very eyes. The planet is experiencing a surge in extreme weather events, from devastating wildfires and prolonged droughts, to catastrophic floods and superstorms of unprecedented intensity. These events are not isolated incidents but rather interconnected symptoms of a planet pushed to its limits. The scientific community has been sounding the alarm for decades, warning of the dire consequences of unchecked greenhouse gas emissions. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the leading international body for the assessment of climate change, has issued increasingly urgent reports, highlighting the accelerating pace of global warming and the urgent need for action. In the face of mounting evidence and growing public concern, a new narrative has emerged, one that attempts to reconcile the capitalist pursuit of profit with the urgent need for environmental sustainability. This narrative, often referred to as green capitalism, posits that market forces and technological innovation can provide the solutions to climate change without requiring fundamental changes to our economic system. Proponents of green capitalism argue that by putting a price on carbon emissions, investing in renewable energy technologies, and promoting energy efficiency measures, we can decouple economic growth from environmental degradation. They point to the success of market-based mechanisms, such as carbon trading schemes, in reducing emissions in certain sectors. However, critics argue that green capitalism is a dangerous illusion, a distraction from the systemic changes necessary to address the root causes of climate change. Market-based solutions have undoubtedly played a role in driving down the costs of renewable energy technologies and promoting energy efficiency measures. The growth of the solar and wind energy sectors, for example, has been nothing short of remarkable, driven in part by government subsidies and incentives. However, these successes should not obscure the limitations of market-based approaches in addressing the systemic challenges posed by climate change. One of the primary limitations of market-based solutions is their reliance on price signals to drive behavioral change. While putting a price on carbon emissions can incentivize companies to reduce their emissions, it does not address the underlying economic incentives that drive overconsumption and waste. The challenges we face are daunting, but they are not insurmountable. Addressing the climate crisis requires a fundamental shift in our thinking, our values, and our economic systems. It demands a willingness to challenge the status quo, to question deeply held assumptions, and to embrace bold and transformative solutions. We must move beyond the narrow confines of short-term thinking and embrace a long-term perspective that prioritizes the well-being of future generations. This requires a shift from a culture of consumerism and individualism to one of sustainability and shared responsibility. Addressing the climate crisis requires a fundamental shift in government policies, moving away from the business-as-usual approach that has brought us to this precipice. This requires bold and ambitious policies that prioritize the transition to a low-carbon economy, invest in renewable energy infrastructure, promote energy efficiency, and protect natural ecosystems. Governments must implement carbon pricing mechanisms such as carbon taxes or cap-and-trade systems to internalize the costs of greenhouse gas emissions and create economic incentives for reducing pollution. These mechanisms should be designed in a way that is equitable and does not disproportionately burden low-income households. While government policies are essential for addressing the climate crisis, they are not enough. Real change requires a groundswell of public support, a movement of people demanding action from their leaders and holding them accountable for their promises. Citizen activism has been instrumental in raising awareness about climate change, pressuring governments to take action, and shifting public opinion. From student-led climate strikes to indigenous-led movements protecting their ancestral lands, people around the world are demanding a just and sustainable future. As the movement for climate justice gains momentum, it inevitably faces resistance from those who benefit from the status quo. The fossil fuel industry, with its vast wealth and political influence, has long sought to delay or derail climate action, protecting its profits at the expense of the planet. This resistance takes many forms, from funding climate change denial campaigns to lobbying against environmental regulations. It often exploits existing social divisions, pitting workers against environmentalists or framing climate action as a threat to economic growth. We stand at a crossroads, a pivotal moment in human history. The choices we make today will determine the fate of our planet and the well-being of generations to come. The climate crisis, driven by centuries of unchecked carbon emissions, primarily fueled by the engine of industrial capitalism, is a stark reminder that our current economic model is unsustainable. The relentless pursuit of economic growth, often at the expense of environmental and social well-being, has brought us to the brink of ecological collapse. Capitalism, with its emphasis on private property, competition, and the pursuit of profit, has undoubtedly unleashed unprecedented technological innovation and material prosperity. However, it has also created a system that prioritizes short-term gains over long-term sustainability, externalizes environmental costs, and exacerbates social inequalities. The climate crisis is a direct consequence of these systemic failures, a stark reminder that the pursuit of profit without regard for its ecological and social consequences is a recipe for disaster. The allure of market-based solutions to climate change is undeniable. The idea that we can harness the power of the market, with its emphasis on efficiency and innovation, to address this global challenge has a certain seductive appeal. However, this approach, often championed under the banner of green capitalism, fails to address the systemic roots of the crisis, and risks perpetuating the very dynamics that have brought us to this point. While market-based mechanisms, such as carbon pricing, can play a role in incentivizing emissions reductions, they are insufficient to address the scale and urgency of the crisis. The commodification of nature, inherent in many market-based approaches, risks reducing the natural world to a set of tradable assets, subject to the whims of market forces, and vulnerable to speculation and manipulation. The time for complacency is over. The climate crisis is an imminent reality. We are at a crossroads. This is a call to action. The time for action is now. The future depends on it.